Good morning, everybody. It's Tom Christie back in the carving shop, and this will be session 2 of carving a Drake spectacled eider. In session 1, we got things really rough shaped. Today, I want to work on refining those shapes. So we've got the main feather groups, but getting them right dimensionally and getting the head prepped for eye installation. We'll probably have to narrow and refine some things up a bit. Then we'll do detail on the bill and get that ready to go. Kind of finalize any carving we're going to do back here on the crest. So we'll get going on that. If you haven't subscribed to the channel and you're valuing what I'm doing here, if you're getting some assistance out of it, please hit the subscribe button. It's free and it helps me out if you do that. And then if you want to be notified as I add additional content, there's a little bell on the right side of the screen. You can click that, pull up a drop-down menu, and that allows you to select that you want to be notified. A lot of people don't want to be notified of new content, but if you do, you have that option. So let's get going on session 2. Just a close-up here. I did a little bit more rough grinding since the last video. And that was primarily driven by still having things way too bulky up here. Had the shapes about right. But then when I'm looking for an eye width dimension, there was no way I could get my calipers over this saddle. And the bird needs to be able to see down in front of it as it's feeding. And it looks right down this path towards the tip of the bill. So I basically from the front needed to pinch this in and narrow the saddle a bit. And I also pulled these eye patches in narrower at the front. And now, I'm at a dimension where this is the measurement between eyes, and we can carve in this inset and some of these features that I want to put in and around the eye and get our eyes at the proper dimensional width so they're not way spread apart and look unnatural. So we'll do a little bit of planning work. Next, I'm going to create this eye channel, and there's a little bit of a cheek here. I'm going to call it a cheek, but it's a feather group that forms there in the back of the eye. Same thing going up in this direction, and then we want to take this material out in here to create an eye channel. Same on this side, using the drilled hole as a guideline right now. So we'll do a little bit of carving on those eye patches next. This is 2 times speed, and I'm going to use this bullet-nosed ruby bit, kind of medium, regular grit, and drive in an eye channel and just follow those guidelines that I sketched on there. And we need to make this deep enough where the eyes, when they're set in properly, will be at the proper width. And you can see I'm creating that eye channel going forward, so there's a line of sight for the bird down to the tip of the bill, and creating that little characteristic pooch of feathers behind the eye, below and above. And those will catch some light and shadows. Hopefully you can see that. I'm trying to get it in decent lighting where you can see the shadow that gets cast there. And I'll just deepen those as much as I need to till I'm satisfied with the way they look. I just pulled the camera up so we could get some sunshine on the bird, and you can really see the shadows in the sunshine. Same thing on the opposite eye patch. It's cutting the groove first and then rounding in both directions. And we want this to be nice and soft, not a big trench that casts a harsh shadow. We want it to be nice and soft looking when it's done. You can see I'm just doing a lot of shaping with that bit. And by using the ruby bit here, we kind of go a little slower than there. I'm getting close to where I want to be. I'm going to take that down a little bit more. I was going to say using a burr you can carve faster, but the finish you get with a ruby bit, of course, is a lot softer and you don't have to do as much sanding. Okay, now I'm where I want to be on the eye width. So I'm going to switch over to the sanding drum. This is a 1/2-inch sanding drum with about 150, 120 grit paper, and I'll use that to smooth these eye patches out. I want everything nice and soft and round. So I'll skip ahead because I'm just going to be using the sander to smooth things out here. There's quite a bit more sanding to do, and we don't need to watch all of that, but I'll just be working to smooth everything out and soften. Now we've got the lower mandible separation penciled in, and I'm going to take the knife and just score along that line carefully. And go back and we want to remove this piece. So I'm digging in there, and then we can go underneath and score the line. It takes a little work, but you can get this out pretty cleanly. Famous last words. Come out of there. Okay. So we'll do that on both sides and then clean that up. So we have a little bit of lower mandible showing there under the saddle. Before we move to the bill, I just wanted to take a closer look at this area so you can see I've done the eye channel up towards the front of the bill so that the bird can see this way, and then a little bit of a cheek or feather group here, a little bit up here to give us a little overhang. And then from the front, I wanted to show you what that looks like. So we've got some sculpture here now, some shape to these eye patches, and we've got it set to the right width, which is key. So we're getting closer. I'm blessed to have a little sunlight in the shop today, and man, it really helps for this detail work. So I'm going to use my grinder to clean up this lower mandible, and then also use kind of a flame shape because I need to tie in better down underneath here into this where the neck joins the head. So we'll smooth those things up. And then I've got some general sanding to do before we start detailing the bill. So we're going to carve a nail and a few details along the edge of the upper mandible, and that's about it. The nostril, by the way, is oftentimes hidden just, oops, can't see that, just underneath. So you can just see like half the nostril coming out from under. And that's the way I want to carve the bill. Here you can see I did that on this bird for my world rig. A little bit of detail along the side, the nail, and we'll be good to go. Okay, we're at 2 times speed again. I'm just going to use some 120 grit sandpaper and just kind of intermediate sand, not finished sand, but get things smoothed up. And I just fold up a little piece of sandpaper so I have a nice edge. You can see I need to clean up this area where the bill kind of goes up into the saddle, and I'm going to use that little flame-shaped ruby bit to define that a little better and clean that up where it lifts up into the saddle area. It's a nice little detail that I think is important. So I'll use that ruby bit to keep cleaning things up and rounding the bill and get that sharpened up and then sanded so we're ready to do the detail on the bill. Some fast sanding there. On this particular decoy, I want to put a little detail under the bill, and that reference picture is great for this purpose. There's the nail, or kind of a reflection of the nail extends underneath, and then that characteristic little V notch, and then a couple of other little features on each side. So I'm going to do some minimal carving down here just to make it more lifelike, but I won't spend too much time since we're on the underside here and there's not a ton of detail to do. I'm going to start with this little 1/8 inch ruby bit. It's a cylindrical shape, and I'm just going to follow my penciled guidelines and first create some separation between the upper and lower mandible. And I'm not going very deep on these lines. I just want to indicate the structure of the bill and not try to, be fully decorative here. Now I'm using that to define where the lower nail is. And now we'll go in and kind of dig down and take material out of this V-notch area. It's pretty characteristics of all species of ducks. The shape is a little different down here, depending on the species. You can see I've formed a V under the bill there at the throat, and that's a characteristic of this particular bird. So I'll speed this up and we can kind of watch finishing this underside work quickly. Once I get this carved, I'll just use some sandpaper and smooth everything out here to finish up the underside of the bill. Okay, a little layout work on the detail for the bill. The nail is pretty large for, I suppose, cracking open clams and crustaceans, but you can see it's pretty large. And then this detail on the end of the bill on each side is up higher on this eider, and it's kind of a soft indication, but clear up here. A lot of ducks, that would be lower, but this is a part of the strength of this bill, I believe, in the way it's designed. And then there's a little bit of a detail along the edge. We'll put that in. Then we'll just show a little bit of a nostril in this area and enclosure, and I'll position that correctly. before we carve. This is a pretty long piece of video, so I've got it at double speed, and I'm using this very small cylindrical ruby bit to cut a groove around the nail and then remove material so that the nail is a little bit elevated from the surrounding area. So I'm cutting a groove and then rounding the nail and the surrounding bill. So we have a nice, soft looking nail. Now I'm using that to put in those bill details at the end on each side. All of these features are pretty subtle on this particular species, so we don't want any deep, harsh lines. I'm just gonna cut these in relatively shallow and then use sandpaper to soften everything, but deep enough to cast a shadow so you can see the feature. So I'm just working to soften those features now. This is a little tool that I can put a ruby bit in, and it's really handy for this type of cleanup work. I've got a little flame-shaped ruby bit and then a ball ruby bit on the opposite end, and I use this tool a lot. I think you can find them on Amazon. They're kind of a twist collet, and James Company has them. They're called a burr holder. And then I'll use a little piece of folded sandpaper and really go to work on smoothing everything out. This is, again, probably 150 grit sandpaper. And you've probably seen this before if you've watched my other videos. I like to fold a little square of sandpaper, and that allows me to get a nice hard edge that I can use to get into creases like this and really soften things up. There are probably better tools. It's just something I've done over time, and it works for me. Now I'm going to use my knife and carefully follow the guideline along the upper mandible to score a line, not very deep. This just gives us a guideline for this small cylindrical bit to go in and carve that feature into the upper mandible. You don't need much here, just enough to cast a shadow so you can see it. And then I'll use sandpaper, again, folded square of sandpaper, to go in and clean that up in both directions. Flipping it over, so you want a nice rounded edge going up and going down. And I'll spend some time on this. The video is not going to show everything, but sanding just takes time, and it's pretty boring to watch, so I just show a little bit. Just know that it takes quite a bit of fine sanding. Now I'm going to work on the nostrils, and I'm going to use that same small bit and cut in the enclosure for the nostril, upper and lower, so we can only see the front end of this enclosure. So it's like a little triangle coming out from under the saddle. And then I'm using it to clean things up and, again, remove material around that enclosure so the enclosure is slightly raised from the surrounding area. And then I'm rounding the edges of that enclosure so that it's not a hard line, but a nice, soft, rounded shape. And just using the pencil to pencil those in so I can get a look at symmetry and are they positioned correctly, and then I'm penciling in the nostril holes. I'm going to switch to a very small ruby ball and use that to create the kind of the half nostril hole. And I am digging back under the
saddle there. So there's, it gives the perception that that continues back under the saddle, and that's important. It doesn't stop there. And then finally, I'm just using, again, a little sanding square and cleaning everything up. And I'll go back and forth on this bill for quite a while because it needs to be really smooth and no carving lines. Everything needs to look natural. So that's looking pretty good. Just doing some other penciling to make sure things look symmetrical. And I'll do some finish sanding. Just a quick look at progress. I've got things sanded, but I'll keep sanding till everything is smooth. And then next time we'll put the eyes in, start working on the body. All right, that'll finish up session 2 of carving the Drake spectacled eider. We've got the head sculpted, and I like the way it looks. Dimensionally, everything looks accurate. So we'll put the eyes in next time and begin rough shaping the body. There are some unique things about the spectacled eider's body. We'll talk about how to position these thorn feathers and where they lie, what their shape is, and but generally we're going to be rounding, putting side pockets in. I'm not going to have a wing sticking out or anything on this particular bird, just a nice clean profile like the bird in my world rig. So until next time, this is Tom Christie signing out. Have a good time carving. See you next time.